Hello, and welcome to today's episode of Real Life, Real Love with myself, Sarah Michelle, and Hayley Henderson. Today, we're going to be talking about the importance of healing in a relationship and understanding that when you're triggered, it's not always just about you and what you did wrong or how you need to fix it. And so, what you can do to work inside the relationship with your partner to heal what's coming up. Before we do that, I'd like to share a little bit about myself and then give Hayley a chance to do that. I am a sex, love, and intimacy coach, and I work with both men and women, single and partnered, to help them call in the relationships they desire, to help them experience polarity in their relationships, which means understanding that dance between masculine and feminine energy, and also improve communication and just improve their sex lives in general. So that's me in a nutshell. You want to share a little bit about you real quick, Hayley, before we get going?
Yeah, I'm Hayley Henderson, and I am a stylist. I help women communicate effectively with clothes, whether it's with themselves or the outside world, and heal a lot of inner wounds that we struggle with. A lot of women want to be confident, wear clothes that make them feel amazing, but there's often a lot of resistance and pain and past traumas, and there's so much stuff that goes into it. You don't just wake up and feel amazing every day. And our primary sources of information for our body and the things that we tell ourselves come from, say, the mom or the dad, like the masculine or feminine figures in your life. And those are your primary original sources of what your body looks like, or how to hold it and how to not. Or they may teach you specific things about the world that may not be true anymore, but we still carry on as this habitual belief system and pattern that, as a single mom, people are not going to like my body. Or as a woman who's skinny, people are not going to like my body because people want XYZ, which is one of my own triggers. So I help women move through that, move through the real stuff that makes you feel happy and confident in clothes. And then you can use it to your advantage as a tool, because your clothes are a tool.
Yes. And I can speak to that firsthand because I've worked with you, Hayley, and it's been a great experience. I think we talked about this on a previous episode, but I first worked with you. I can't remember if it was the year that we met, which would be 2016, or if it was right after. It could have been 2017. Either way, I mean, it's been plenty of time, 5-6 years, something like that, that my own personal style has been evolving. And I actually feel like I've grown younger in my style since working with you, which is great, because I remember hating after I had kids going to the store, because the programming inside of me said, you're a mom, you have to dress like a mom now. But then I would go into the mom stores and I would be like, oh, I don't want to wear any of this. Like, there's sleeves down to almost your elbows and stuff like that. And I was like, I had my first baby at 25. Like, I wasn't ready to start dressing like that. So, and then there was this period of time where I had to be comfortable going out and stuff like that because I feared judgment from other people and stuff of she's a mom, why is she wearing that? That sort of thing. So anyway, yeah, working with you has been a huge blessing. Today, though, we're talking about getting triggered in relationships. And one of the reasons I really wanted to discuss this today is because I'm so involved as a coach in the personal development world. And then also, from what I understand, now I've only lived in America. So I grew up in the US and haven't lived anywhere else. I've traveled, but that's it. We're a very goal-oriented and independent society compared to some other countries. And that's always been the natural way of being for me because that's all I've ever known. And so what happened for me, and I still work through, is when I get into relationships and things go wrong, immediately I want to pull back on myself and I want to say, okay, what did I do wrong? What pattern in me is bringing this out in the relationship? What can I fix? And everything comes back on me and it starts to feel really heavy. It also impacts my communication because I stop communicating because I think, well, what's the use in saying this or expressing why I'm hurt and letting them know what's going on. If I'm the one who needs to fix it, like I should just handle this on my own, right? And then it creates issues because we're in a relationship and we're not meant to be independent in a relationship. And I think that that's something really important to bring up from the beginning too, is a lot of times people think that there's either dependence, which they associate with like codependence,
Mhm.
dependence, or independence. But there's
Mhm.
actually a third level of interdependence where, like, once you become independent, you start to learn how to have your own identity, but be part of a community at the same time. And that's where relationships are. So much, there's so much over glorification of independence, I feel like. But
Yes.
we're humans. We're meant to be in relationship with others, but that's also where all of our growth happens. If you study like human design or Gene Keys, are two that come to my mind right away. They talk about how the most powerful things you're going to learn is through a relationship because you need someone else to reflect it to you. So you can do all the personal development you want sitting with a coach or, reading your books and all this sort of stuff. And it takes getting out there and experiencing in real life and having that trauma or whatever like thrown back into your face, and then you figuring out in the moment, how do I stay present, how do I work through this?
Yes. And a lot of people forget that. It just reminds me of last year. I had a friend say to me, there was like a group of us standing around, we're like making food, and one of my friends, she's having trouble with her girlfriend, and then she was talking about how another friend in the friendship group was causing some drama, and she was trying to explain something. She goes, I don't know. Haley's gonna know how to explain this. Can you tell me what is the thing here, and like what I'm trying to explain? And I was like, it's like interdependence. You've got to think of it. Well, I think you've got to think of it like if you were on this planet as an individual by yourself, you're going to be very hungry. You're going to be really tired. You're going to have a really short life. And we know this. This is like why, like, if you think about like a village setting or like a relationship setting, each person brings their own strengths, like a baker, a mechanic, or a hairdresser. Like each person, we have our own unique gifts, and we are solidly good at them with our eyes closed and hands tied behind our back. We're just good at stuff. And when we function in a healthy, interdependent relationship, we're not relying on that person. It's like a service or a product they provide, and we give them like an exchange of value. We don't just be like, give me the bread because you're good at it. We'll provide it's something that is like an exchange value. It's an agreement, whether it's like money or a service. Because back in the day, it used to be a service. And if you're functioning in like your relationships in a healthy, interdependent way, you can be like, hey, babe, can you please pick up the kids at 3 p.m.? And you're not like independent where you're like, no, I'm going to get there even though I'm going to be late. Or you're not like dependent on them where you like, how do you say it in that regard? Like there is something about it where you expect from them as opposed to like asking. And it's a different conversation where you like demand and command. Whereas if you're like, even though it might be like their thing, it's a nice thing to be asked, hey babe, can you please pick up the kids at like 3 or what have you?
Well,
And
and when you expect something and then your expectations aren't met, like you're just setting yourself up for disappointment and resentment. Like
yeah, it feels
no
like
is there.
old school 80s relationships that did not function well. And like in terms of like this with this girlfriend, she was like, yeah, like, they were all saying, you need to be more independent or you need to be more dependent. And I was like, just think about it from a healthy position. Like if you are functioning in
Mhm.
your baker and etc. People are just naturally good at something, but you also don't expect them to make you bread just because they're good at it. And there's a value exchange, and there's like this beautiful relationship that you build. Like, if you're a person who goes to a cafe all the time, you build a relationship with that barista. You walk in and they know what your coffee is, or, and you're going to provide them with an exchange of goods or services or a payment or a value. And in relationships, I think it's so important to remember that, like, you're in a relationship or potential relationship, and the space between you is what you look after. This is like your thing that you create together. We don't want to be by ourselves. We get lonely. The stats are horrible. Like, there are times of solitude, and some people are hermits, but we want to talk to other people. We want to feel. Like, who doesn't want their skin to crawl with ecstasy? Like, it's different when you do it with somebody else as opposed to doing it by yourself. And there's a reason why it's different. There's a reason why we crave it. Sometimes there's a reason why you would get wetter for somebody else, because your body is like, hey, we like that person, but you don't.
That's such a creepy voice. Right. That person.
It's like my internal voice, obviously, but we don't demand that person. It's a healthy relationship where you're interdependent and you have like a web of things in your relationship, or inside like this little make-believe town where everybody's got their own gifts. And inside your relationships, there will be things that your man is good at that are just not your jam. Like, I cannot fix things. I am not handy to save myself. If I have to, I have to. I have a toolkit, but it is not my thing. I'll look at that toolkit and be like, nobody needs a door handle today. It's fine. It can stay. Whereas, men that I've had relationships with and even that I've dated, they are super good at that stuff. It makes them happy. And it makes me happy. I'm not like expecting or demanding it. When they fix it, it's like, oh my God, this is so exciting. And I'm like, do you know what? I'm really good at food. Like should we go eat? And that creates like an interdependence where they're aware that I'm really good at food and it makes me happy to make food for other people. And that's another thing. I struggle to make food just for myself. I'm just like, yeah, no, I don't really care. But if somebody's coming over, like, just you wait. It is going to be the best food you've ever had in your life. And there's something about that. There's something about the way that we function in these relationships with other people. Sometimes it does make you shine. Sometimes it does make you feel your best. And that's okay. Don't let anybody tell you you have to be independent or you're being too dependent. You get to make up your own mind on that. You're the one at the end of the day who has to commit to this person or not, who has to have sex with them or not. Like, it's important for what prioritizes for you, like how that feels for you, especially as a woman. How does it feel?
I love the analogy of the community. I have no idea how I've never thought of that before, but that really, like, the moment you said it, it helped me release like that guilt of needing support, of like requiring support and even requiring the feedback of appreciation. It was like, well, duh. Because if I was picturing us as a little village, I would be doing all of these things with respect and appreciation. So why is that not happening at home that way? I just assume at home that I have to do it all, right? Like and I know that's not everybody's programming, but there is some of that programming from like my upbringing and just my family that I've been around of like, I have to carry everything myself. And if I don't, I'm weak or I'm not trying hard enough. I'm not committed enough, whatever these things are. So I love that analogy so much. Let's switch gears just slightly though and talk about like when you get triggered in a relationship. So now we understand that we should be in this relationship as a community and interdependence is the goal here. So now we're interdependent, but something happens and we get triggered, right? Our partner reflects something to us, whether they verbally say it or like a situation happens. I'm trying to think of an example to make this a little more concrete. Does one come to your mind right away?
It could be so many things. I'm like, man, there are thousands of situations that I could talk about. There are things that they could bring up a wound. So, I don't have my biological father doesn't talk to me, and that's a whole thing that's on his side. He decided when my parents divorced when I was 9 to turn into an asshole, and then the minute that he didn't have to talk to me, he stopped. And that's on him. I have tried so hard, like even at like great granddad's funeral. He was standing there with my other uncle, so I went up to them, and it was so interesting. Uncle Adam standing there just like, this is so awkward, because I was talking to my dad, and my dad's in the middle, Uncle Adam's on the other side, and you could see Uncle Adam's face just go, holy shit, he is not talking to his daughter. And I'm still talking, and my daughter's running around, because I live in Australia. I've gone back to New Zealand. Like, there was so many things that would make it like, he should respond. Like, if he's not, and the fact that I'm his daughter and he hasn't seen me forever, and I'm like, talking to him about his granddaughter, but you can't make those situations better sometimes, and those people sometimes will do things internally for us and create value sets or beliefs. And in a relationship, I can be triggered by somebody who may ignore me or may be confrontational or aggressive, which is like that person when I was growing up. And for me, what I believe, like if it was something that was created in a relationship with somebody, so my relationship with my father, he was very violent, etc. So if somebody slightly seems like a man seems slightly violent with me, he's not, but it's a trigger. It's like this, because you know when you're like hyper aware, like they just like growled a little bit. It could have been a joke, but your body was like, ah! Like just freaks out. You're like out of your skin, and the best way to heal that is because it was created in a relationship, the person in front of you can help you heal through it because it was created in conjunction with this other person. So, and that's what we were talking about before. Like sometimes you can't heal everything by yourself. A lot of things that were created in relationships often get healed in relationships. Like you can sit and read all the books on style you want, but if you never put clothes on and leave your house, you don't know what it's like. Or you can watch all the dance videos and until your eyes are sore, but until you stand up and move your body, you don't know what dancing feels like. And until you like, you can read all of these dating and relationship books, you can do all of the courses, you can listen to all of the stuff on the internet, but until you have these live conversations with a man or a woman or whatever your situation is, it's so different. And this is why these conversations are exciting and important, because it's not a script, it's actually, how do you feel like on the inside, and where did this come from, and inviting this person in front of you to step forward with you. And often the person will, because they want the best for you. And we're past the point of surrounding ourselves by assholes, so the person in front of you is typically a good person.
I really love that you said inviting. I think that's so important here, is because when you're in a relationship where it's maybe more toxic, or maybe you just don't have the emotional maturity or good communication, and something happens, you can react by like attacking them, right? Like most often, probably verbally, but like yelling at them, screaming at them. The type of relationships we're all moving towards and wanting are these conscious relationships. So we're talking about a situation where you've been triggered, you recognize you've been triggered, but you don't need to go it alone. And so, like you said, inviting is the perfect word for that, because you don't always need to know. So, as you were talking about what your triggers are, I thought of like one that comes up for me a lot is that in my family growing up, everybody always had lots of energy, was very busy, and were hard workers. And so, as an adult, I find it challenging to not do stuff all the time, right? Like I know, because I learn about feminine energy and being in my feminine, and I teach about it and all this sort of stuff, but there can still be this internal dialogue. And so if my partner comes home and sees me napping and says something crappy about me napping, oh, you were sleeping today, while I was at work. Like, and actually they might not mean anything by it, but I will probably react to that as a trigger. Because I feel like if somebody else is working, I should be working too. Like it's really hard for me to rest if everyone around me is not also resting. But like you said, the inviting part of it is, I don't have to be able to process all of this on my own and come back to my partner and say, when you said this, I felt this, and this is what we need to do moving forward, or whatever. You can, if all of that happens and works for you or whatever, because you just have this moment of clarity where everything comes through, okay, go ahead and communicate it. But it's also perfectly okay to say, you know what? Growing up, I had to do, and it's hard for me to rest.
Mm-hmm.
And I just need you to know that I'm learning how to rest. I'm learning how to take up space and allow my body to feel good and relax when she needs to. And again, that's just inviting them. That's not telling them what to do. That's not getting angry with them. for participating in your little simulation here. It's just letting them know what's going on and giving them space to step in and do whatever they want to do.
And often, the person, whether it's male or female, they hold it because you've invited and opened yourself up, and you're like that soft jellyfish without a protection. You're like, oh my God, I could get squashed right now, because that's how it feels, especially if you're talking about something from a childhood wound. So, in terms of being lazy, I have wounds, but opposite, because and my one of my sisters and I talk about this a lot. And mum didn't like doing stuff, so we have this, like, we've got to constantly do, and we don't know how to relax or not do anything. And it's like that value set, because we're like, we don't want to end up like her. We want to build a better life, so that means we need to do stuff in order to have different. We don't want to ever be caught, being told that we're lazy. Like, it just is such a trigger for us. And so when, you have these conversations with other people and invite them in to this situation with you, because you're not telling them what to do, you're in your feminine and you're being vulnerable and ready to heal, this other person almost always like grabs the baton and they're just like, yeah, let's do this. And they're like, scoop you up, they'll cuddle you, their words will do something that feels like they're cuddling you. And all of a sudden, it's like all of those things that hurt, it just like melts away even further. And you're just like, oh, so I'm still valuable as a person. Oh, this is not my past. And it does a reset on your feelings and on your biochemistry and on your neurological processes that you had in place, your habits and things that you would do by default. It helps readjust those and does a bit of a recalibration. And if you need reaffirming in this area, you can invite your man to like reaffirm it a couple of times for the next week and be like, hey babe, remember we had that conversation? And you can be like, oh, we did, I love you so much, because they're your person that is helping you, and they love that helping, and then they like want to cuddle you even more, and then you're all more like, we're all just cuddling now and healing together. And that's like in that interdependence, like he was an outside person and better at this thing than you were, and you were just this soft jellyfish feeling unprotected. That's how I imagine it. Like, you could get squashed and hurt and like burned alive, whereas he's like, it's okay babe, I've got a shell, how about we just fix this together, like we'll weather the storm together. And you didn't have to be dependent on him to fix it. He just went, I got this, give it to me. And
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And go into the bedroom and be like, oh, I have a pain, I'm gonna go heal it, bye. Like, you didn't do that either and shut him out.
Yeah, you didn't shut him out. That's important too. And I got so excited about that statement, I forgot what I was going to say. It's so true, though. You didn't shut him out. What were you saying before that I was going to respond? Oh, the jellyfish thing. I think a lot of us, it's natural, right? It's natural that when we feel vulnerable or scared, that we just want to protect ourselves. And that's why feminine energy, if you don't have a masculine container around you in some way, shape, or form, you'll jump into your own masculine without thinking about it. It's instinct to protect yourself. But it's important to practice being vulnerable, because in healthy relationships, if you show up and you're vulnerable, the other partner automatically protects you. They see that vulnerability and they take care of you. It's the unhealthy ones that will attack you while you're vulnerable or while you're down. And as much as that may suck if you experience it, it does give you information. It does give you an answer about the state of the relationship and whether or not you should be in it. So being with someone, and you can always test out the vulnerability on smaller stuff, right? Like, you should be naturally. When I say you should be, I don't mean like, hey, we have this step-by-step thing, and by month 5, you should have asked these questions and known these answers. I just mean, like, naturally, as you're opening up and getting to know people, your partner, in that first 6 months or whatever, there should be little tests where you're figuring out if you can trust them or not, how much you can open up to them, right? And hopefully it just keeps being one green light after another of like, yep, this person I'm safe with.
Yes, and it's important to remember how to help or how to rescue you or how to like hold space. And that's okay too, because that doesn't necessarily mean it's a red flag. Sometimes they don't know. Sometimes your person you're dating or in a relationship with or potential anything, they've come from something that didn't work out too. So we both bring baggage to this. And it doesn't matter how much you've healed, like we've said this whole time, when something's created in a relationship, it often gets healed in a relationship. And this like it like gives me so much joy to think about how we also get to create a safe space for men to heal too. We get to, like, if he doesn't know how to respond to that, and I think I've said it in a previous episode. I had a girlfriend here in Australia, and she was struggling with her partner. They've got 5 children, and he works away a lot. So sometimes he'll go out for like 6 weeks, and then he'll come back, and there's just so much is going on for her. And she was like, Hayley, I'm just struggling with him so much. She's like, we were having this argument the other day. We went for a walk out in there, and she's like, going on. I was like, oh, did he leave? She's like, what? And I was like, when you were just letting this all go, was he still standing there? She was like, yes. And I was like, well, then maybe he doesn't know how to verbally respond. And she was like, oh my God, I need to go hug him now. Like she was expecting him to respond back with the same, which obviously is another conversation too. But sometimes we think men are going to respond the way we want them to respond, which is like that dependence on them responding in a certain way. But sometimes men, one, don't know how to respond, or two, they do the response they can or want to. And so sometimes men need to process things. So he may just be like, okay, you're having a really bad day. I got a lot of stuff to do. Here's a glass of wine. I'm going to be back in an hour. Like that may be his solution for now. And that's okay. Or he may handle it really badly. And I think the future of relationships is learning true unconditional love and compassion for each other. And he may come back to this at another point in time when he's ready and available. And this is one thing that us women do very different to men. We can almost always, unless we're overwhelmed, we can stand and like immediately respond. We are so good at emergencies. We are so good at like conversations we're not ready for. We can have those things. Like there is nothing holding us back. We're like, wait a second, last week I had 10 things to say about that. And we go into that like file cabinet in our brain and we pull it out and we keep going. And men stand there just like, I didn't know you knew about that topic. Because men like to be prepared. And so sometimes he wants to do his best work for you. So sometimes he may fail at providing like the shell or the shelter when you're feeling like a raw jellyfish. He may come back to it, and he may come to this relationship and to you with some of his baggage and some of his wounds. And he may have had a woman in the past fully rely on him, and it didn't really work out, and it became like this toxic situation. And now he's standing in front of you, and it looks like you're doing the same thing, even though you're not. So if you're genuinely vulnerable about it, and you genuinely care about him, and you're genuinely inviting him, and you're available to whatever happens, knowing that you're safe and okay, whether this person shows up or fucks off, it doesn't matter. You're going to be okay. He may actually come back at this tomorrow or next week. He may turn up with flowers. And in the meantime, and this is the hard bit, to not get mad, angry, resentful, build up this like conversation in your mind. He didn't show up for me. He didn't do these things, like my girlfriend here. And she was like, oh my God. And I was like, in the future, does he ever come back to the conversation? She was like, he does. And sometimes it's 6 weeks later when he's got back and he's had his space to process and go through it. I was like, babe, you got 5 kids. I don't know how you do it together, let alone having an intimate relationship in so much chaos. Like sometimes men need a different type of space, and sometimes they don't know how to handle it. And sometimes we help them heal too. Like as an interdependence, not a dependence and not an independent aspect, but as in like this is a team effort. and we get to create what that looks like. And so sometimes we need to hold each other's hands as though we are, working in a town together. And not everybody's going to know everything straight away. Not everything's rosy and amazing. But if, like, the underlying current is trust and unconditional love for this person, that if I'm going to be in a relationship with him, he's going to show up and it's going to feel good. It may not sound like what you think, it may not look like what you think, but it's going to feel good. And if he's not responding immediately, sometimes that's okay. Like, think about the times when you didn't respond immediately. Later on, you're like, damn, what a fucking bitch. I could have been nicer. You're like, well, I stood all over that person. How do I say sorry? Do they like jelly beans?
I actually tend to be quiet because I have had too many experiences of where I've spoken right away and then been like, but also I've been on the other side of that of hearing someone say something that they then later try to apologize for. And it's like, okay, cool. Thanks for the apology. Also, I can't unhear what I heard, you
Yeah.
know? So it's like, I actually walk that line where I what's the word I'm looking for? Anyway, I tend to be quiet and wait until I'm ready to speak instead of speaking right away. But I don't know how you feel. I know you're a Sagittarius, right? So you've got a little more fire in you than I do. And I know that fire signs love to, I want to say love to talk, but air signs love to talk. Fire signs love to express themselves. So, yes, most definitely. Well, thank you for chatting about this today. Let's see. What do I want to say to wrap this up? I guess maybe just that we all get triggered in relationships, and we need to remember, like you started off with from the very beginning, that this is a community. Our home, whether it's just the two of us or us and children, us and if there's parents living in the home, whatever, like we're a community and it's okay to be interdependent. It's okay to work with each other. And it's also okay to, when triggered, work through it with your partner or have your partner be there to just hold space for you, whatever it is you need. Yes, it is your wounding in most cases. Sure, there will be times where you're reflecting to your partner and it's actually about their wounding instead of yours. But that doesn't mean that you're the only one who's responsible for fixing it or that you have to do it all by yourself. You can absolutely do it with your partner. So thank you for joining us today. Be sure to like the video, share it with a friend or a partner who might be interested in the message too, and subscribe so that you get updates and notifications when we post a new video. Thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week.